Hey everyone, it's Y again. For this video, I'm going to take a look at the changes and fixes made to Halo 2's classic visuals in the Season 8 update for the Master Chief Collection. As a quick heads up, if you haven't seen my Halo 2 graphical issues video, I recommend giving that a watch first, since I'll be referencing some of my findings from that video in this one. Now let's start things off by going over how the colors look in-game. Before the Season 8 update, colors in Halo 2 look slightly washed out when compared to the original release. And this is because color correction was enabled before the Season 8 update. With the release of Season 8, color correction has been disabled, making the game's colors appear as they were originally intended. A good demonstration for showing how the colors were off is by pausing the gameplay during a white screen. Notice how the shade of white for the Season 7 gameplay appears duller than the others? That's because of the color correction. And just for comparison's sake, here's what white should look like when being displayed. It's worth noting that all the gameplay captures that you'll see in this video are taken with the gamma setting set to the default value. So for the Season 7 gameplay, the gamma was set to 5, and the Season 8 gameplay had the gamma set to 6. The lighting bloom effect has also been increased so it matches the amount seen on the original Xbox. This change is going to increase the amount of glow that you see coming off of light sources and reflective objects as well. Bloom can visually add more vibrance to some surfaces where without it, it would look rather dull. I'd argue that increasing the bloom was one of the changes that Halo 2 needed the most to help restore its original visuals. The Season 8 update has fixed the weather particle system for Halo 2. This means that weather effects such as snowfall and rainfall will now properly be rendered. You'll now be able to see falling snowflakes from the sky, just like how it was on the original Xbox. Rainfall also benefits from this fix as well. Everything from the heavy rainfall on the Great Journey to the light fog on Delta Halo. Back on Season 7, the rain wasn't completely broken, but it wasn't quite as heavy as it should be in some spots, like on the map's Backwash and Warlock for example. And by fixing the weather effects, the floating flood spores have returned in the game's final cutscene. On both the levels, the Arbiter and the Oracle, the color of the wind has been changed so that it matches the visuals seen on the original Xbox. The density of the storm has also been increased for the same reason. The brightness of the fog seen at the bottom of Lockout has also been toned down quite a bit. Previously, there was a bug that caused the fog to move faster than it was meant to. The higher the frame rate you played the game at, the faster the fog would move. This bug has been fixed, and the fog now moves at the correct speed regardless of the set frame rate. Visors now appear much more vibrant. Before they looked faded and dull, but the Season 8 update has fixed that. This includes Master Chief's visor, visors in multiplayer, and even the pilot's visors in campaign. There's a whole bunch of lighting fixes across the campaign. In the Heretic cutscene, the Arbiter is properly lit, Tartarus's hair no longer glows in the dark, and characters are now casting shadows, including Master Chief seen at the very end of the cutscene. The dynamic lights seen at the end of Kyra Station now appear to be working properly. This includes the lighting seen in the end of the level cutscene, which is a big fix since this particular cutscene had all kinds of lighting issues, which I touched more on in my visual issues video. The blinking light above the doorway at the very beginning of the level outskirts now properly illuminates the surrounding walls and floor nearby. The opening cutscene for the level The Arbiter has also seen lighting fixes, with the Arbiter being properly illuminated and shadows being cast on the floor in the mausoleum. On the level The Oracle, just after the elevator section, is a hallway that used to have a bunch of lighting and shadow issues, those of which have been fixed. Near the end of the level, you come across a bunch of lights that flash on and off. This one in particular used to have two square shapes on the floor that wouldn't illuminate. Those two spots on the floor were fixed in the update. The light that can be seen from underwater at the end of Regret is now properly bright as it used to be. There was an issue on Sacred Icon that would occur after hitting a specific loading zone where parts of these supports would appear pitch black. This no longer seems to be an issue. The lighting in the vent that leads outside near the end of the level has had its lighting properly adjusted. The light that's being cast on the door at the beginning of Uprising has been restored. The lighting effect that changes the brightness on your screen based on your location on Gemini has been fixed. There was a bug in the game that caused brutes' bodies to not properly react to lighting. This caused brutes to look rather dull and almost out of place in scenes. As you can see in these comparison shots, that bug has been fixed. It's also worth pointing out that this bug also affected Tartarus. In regarding the weapons, some changes have been made. The shader used by the SMG has been changed from the one seen in Halo 2 Vista to the one that was used on the original Xbox. This gives it a noticeably more darker shade of black. The SMG weapon model also now properly adjusts whenever you look either up or down. The battle rifle has also been changed so that it now matches its original Xbox look. A closer look at the visual differences between the two versions shows that its Vista appearance has less bumpy details when compared to its original Xbox form. And just like the others, the carbine has also received this treatment, where it's now sporting the details that were seen on the original Xbox instead of the ones seen in Halo 2 Vista. The last weapon related change that I want to cover is that the stationary turret camera has been fixed so it's no longer situated so far back behind the player. The bump mapping across the game has been fixed. Before the update, the outlines created by bump maps were too dark and didn't match the original Xbox. The sun now properly renders on all levels and maps. Before being fixed, if you looked up to where the sun should be, all you'd see is glare without the sun being there. This is no longer the case. The bug where certain lights could be seen through objects has been fixed. Some examples of this include the lights on the Elite's armor, the ammo counter on the battle rifle, and the taillights on the Warthog. A number of objects weren't as reflective as they should be. The first-person Spartan armor has seen improved reflectiveness, but it looks like it still needs just a little bit more to match the original Xbox. Examples of objects that now have the proper amount of reflective characteristics include the armor worn by grunts, some of the windows on both the armory and Cairo station, the turret positioned on top of the scarab, these strips of metal that can be seen on Metropolis on both the arches of the bridge and along the wall inside the tunnel. The gondola you ride across on the level's sacred icon also falls into this category. There's also the Wraith, as well as the Halo ring itself, which can be seen in a number of cutscenes throughout the campaign. There's a handful of instances where the water's visuals were changed to better match the original Xbox. These include the levels Delta Halo, Uprising, and Gravemine. The changes made to the water on multiplayer maps include Sanctuary, Ivory Tower, Gemini, and also Warlock. The orange shield indicator lights that are seen on the back of Elite's arms and legs have been restored and are functioning properly in multiplayer. All the rendering issues the NVIDIA GPU had appear to have been fixed. The various plant life that wasn't showing up before is now properly being rendered, and so are the grates throughout the campaign, as well as the sewer water on outskirts. Next, I want to go over some of the missing details that have been added back in this update. When picking up a hidden skull found in the campaign, the name of the skull will now appear in the upper left-hand side of the screen. The trim that goes over the sewer grates on outskirts has been restored, and so have the various cracks on the ground that can be found on the map Delta Halo and Regret. On the level High Charity, the ship in Amber Clad has had its signs of damage brought back. And on the multiplayer maps, we have the stains under some of the windows on the map Turf, the missing layer of detail on various Forerunner structures found on both the maps Sanctuary and Containment, and in Containment's case, the missing detail made up some of the large portions of the map, making its absence very noticeable. On Terminal, various objects were missing some detail, such as these pillars and the ceiling in the garage area. And finally, there was a similar issue with the various pipes on the map Tombstone. the map lockout actually had additional details that were not present on the original Xbox. Large portions of the map were covered in black markings. These markings have been removed in this update. Up next, I want to take a look at the effects that have been restored in cutscenes. The appropriate cutscenes now show a fading transition when changing between scenes. Cortana's podium light now lights up in the intro cutscene to Cairo Station. The camera now shows focus during this scene for the intro to Sacred Icon. Miranda now gets illuminated by the firing SMGs at the end of Quarantine Zone. And in that same scene, the electrical effect caused by Tartarus's hammer has been restored. At the beginning of High Charity, when the Pelican crash lands, its explosion now includes its missing detail. At the end of the level, Cortana's hologram used to be too transparent. The update made her more opaque, but when you compare it to the original Xbox, it looks like she needs to be just a bit more translucent. Also during the end of the level cutscene, you can see that the blue glare coming off the Dreadnought's thruster has been restored. There's quite a few effects that were either duller or completely missing until the Season 8 update came out and fixed them. The zapper in the armory was missing a light that comes directly out of the pillars. The beams that shock the Arbiter are missing part of its effect. The blue colored streak effect that can see both below and above the gondolas. The white colored part of the shooting light effect that goes down the hallways on Sacred Icon. The intensity of the light coming out of the pathway that the constructor drones use. The light coming out of the shield generator on the Great Journey. The rounded edge of light effect seen at the end of the beam of light in the room where you fight Tartarus. The thickness of the beam that gets shot out of the Sentinel beam gun. The same fix applies to the gold variant of the gun that shoots the blue beam as well. The blue projectiles that come out of both the Ghost and the Banshee seem to better match the original Xbox. The white part at the center of the projectiles shot by both the Scarab and the Shade Turret. The effect that comes out of the thruster for the Spectre, the Wraith, the Pelican, and the In Amber and Clad. One thing to note with the thrusters on the In Amber Clad is that you used to be able to see them through the side of the ship. That's no longer the case in Season 8. The gravity lift that's located under the Phantom has had the white color effect made more prominent. The same can also be said for those gravity lifts used to get into the sniper towers. The shade of blue of Cortana in the endgame cutscene has been corrected. And finally, we have the brightness of the headlights seen on the map terminal. There's also been a considerable amount of broken visuals that have been fixed in this update. Before, certain leaves weren't being properly rendered and appeared too bright in some instances. The jetpack worn by elites appeared red instead of blue. It also affected the Heretic Leader's jetpack as well. The doors that can be seen on the levels of the Arbiter and the Oracle had a visual bug that caused them to have dark squares near the corners of their frames. At the end of Regret, when High Charity comes into view, it had a visual bug that made it look like there was two High Charities stacked up over one another. Visual changes have been made to the Gravemind tentacles so they better match the appearance seen on the original Xbox. They seem to have a less green reflectiveness to them. The missing reflective Forerunner pieces that can be seen throughout the game have been brought back. The flickering signs that can be seen on top of the ramp on the map Tombstone have been removed. And the teleporters throughout the game had a visual bug where they had these little dark spots on them, which is no longer the case in the Season 8 update. Now let's take a look at explosions. As you near the end of the level of the Oracle, explosions start going off around the map. The smoke left behind by these explosions no longer disappears instantly, and instead slowly dissipates. When destroying either a Ghost or Banshee, they will begin to violently shake and then explode a second time. This shaking effect has been restored, which has them reacting to being destroyed just like they would back on the original Xbox. The barrel-like explosive objects that can be found in both the campaign and multiplayer now have their explosive visual back. Some of the objects in the game had issues with clipping through other objects, one of those being parts of the Marines' uniforms. They would clip through walls and even the Marine themselves. It was especially noticeable in the ending cutscene for Metropolis on Johnson's shoulder. There's a brief moment during the intro cutscene for the level Regret, where part of Cortana's arm and body used to clip through the camera. And lastly, part of the plasma rifle and the brute plasma rifle would clip through itself when viewed from a distance. The one rendering distance issue that I pointed out in my visual issues video appears to have been fixed, which allows you to see this effect from the same distance that you would have been able to see it on the original Xbox. In my visual issues video, I pointed out a number of instances where Z-fighting was a problem, and based on what I've seen so far in my gameplay, it appears that 343 has fixed all the Z-fighting issues that I've had with Halo 2. This means that the Z-fighting that you used to be able to see on your weapons is no more. As you just saw, 343 has done a lot of great work fixing the issues in Halo 2. Not only does it look considerably better, but it's also a lot more accurate to the visuals seen in its original release. Anyways, that's all for this video. If you enjoyed what you saw, consider hitting that like button and subscribe to my channel for even more content. Thanks for watching and have a good one.